The rooftop restaurant sits 70 floors above Seoul. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across silk tablecloths. Governors, CEOs, and shadow kings dine in calculated silence. Then, a glass shatters. Kang Hyun-suk, the most feared man in 3 countries, collapses without warning. His body hits the marble floor. Nobody moves. His bodyguards freeze, paralyzed by the weight of failure. Executives retreat, unwilling to risk association with his death. Even the 3 doctors among the guests hesitate. Fear outweighs duty. Seconds stretch into eternity. Then, a quiet young woman pushes through the terrified crowd. She wears a simple black server's uniform. Her hands are steady. Her face shows no fear. She drops to her knees beside the most dangerous man in Asia, checks his pulse, tilts his head back, and presses her mouth to his. 1 breath. 2, 3. Her palms compress his chest with desperate precision. The room holds its breath. Then, he gasps. His eyes fly open. Dark. Disoriented. Alive. The restaurant falls completely silent. Hyun-suk's gaze sweeps across the frozen faces of powerful men who watched him die. He says nothing to them. Instead, he stares only at the woman kneeling beside him. Her brown skin gleams with exertion. Her warm eyes hold no recognition of who he is. Only relief that he breathes. She begins to rise. His hand catches her wrist. Cold fingers against warm skin. And calmly, without breaking eye contact, he speaks to his men. Don't let her leave. Sometimes, fate doesn't whisper. It stops your heart, and sends a stranger to restart it. If this story moves you, please like, share, and subscribe. The chaos erupted immediately after his words. Bodyguards surged forward. Executives scrambled for explanations. Medical teams flooded through the doors. But Zuri Adebayo remained frozen in place. His grip on her wrist was not painful. It was precise. Controlled. Like everything about him. Sir, one guard spoke urgently, we need to transport you. In a moment. His voice was ice wrapped in silk. He hadn't looked away from her face. Zuri's heart pounded against her ribs. She had acted on instinct. 15 years of medical volunteer work. 6 years of emergency response instruction. When someone collapsed, she moved. She never asked who they were. She never considered consequences. But now, staring into eyes that held the coldness of deep winter, she understood she had saved someone extraordinary. And terrifying. What is your name? His question was quiet. Almost gentle. It made her more afraid. Zuri, she said softly. Zuri Adebayo. He repeated it silently. His lips shaped the syllables like he was committing them to memory. Like he would never forget. You saved my life. I saved a human being. She kept her voice steady. That's all. Something flickered behind his eyes. Curiosity. Perhaps surprise. Most people would have trembled. Begged for reward. Or recognized his face from the whispered rumors that haunted Seoul's underground. But this woman looked at him like he was simply a patient. Nothing more. You're not afraid, he observed. I've watched people die in my arms. She met his gaze without flinching. Fear comes after. Never during. Paramedics surrounded them now. They lifted him onto a stretcher. His grip finally released her wrist. But his eyes never left her face. Take her information, he commanded his closest guard. Everything. Zuri stepped back. That won't be necessary. She turned and walked toward the service exit. Her hands finally trembled. The adrenaline was fading. Reality was settling. She had just mouth-to-mouth resuscitated a man whose presence made billionaires fall silent. She needed to disappear. By the time Hyun-suk's men reached the kitchen corridor, Zuri Adebayo was gone. 3 days later, Kang Hyun-suk sat in his private hospital suite. Medical equipment surrounded him. Security lined every hallway. Yet his mind focused on one thing. The woman who vanished. We've reviewed all security footage, sir. His head of intelligence, Park Jae-won, stood at attention. The catering company has no employee by that name. The uniform she wore was authentic, but she wasn't assigned to that event. Hyun-suk's expression remained unreadable. The tattoo on his inner wrist, intricate Korean calligraphy intertwined with traditional African geometric patterns, rested against white hospital sheets. She crashed the event. It appears she was filling in for someone. An informal arrangement. No records. Most men would have abandoned the search. She was a stranger. A brief encounter. But Hyun-suk had not survived 2 assassination attempts by ignoring details. He had watched powerful men freeze when he fell. Doctors among them. Politicians. People who owed him everything. They had calculated risk, weighed consequences, and decided his life wasn't worth their involvement. But she, a woman with nothing to gain, had pushed through terror, dropped to her knees, and breathed life back into his body. Without hesitation, without recognition, without fear. "Find her," he said quietly. The words were simple. The weight behind them was absolute. "Sir, if she doesn't want to be found, then look harder." Jae-won bowed slightly. He had served Hyun-suk for 18 years. He recognized this tone. The Ghost Emperor had become interested. And when Kang Hyun-suk became interested in something, or someone, heaven itself could not prevent him from possessing it. 2 weeks later, Zuri unlocked the front door of her cafe. Morning light spilled through clean windows. The shop was small, simple, warm wooden counters. The scent of fresh coffee and chin-chin, a Nigerian fried snack her mother's recipe made famous in their neighborhood. Adebayo's corner had been her refuge for 4 years. After everything that happened with her father, the accusations, the scandal, the destroyed reputation, she had rebuilt her life here, quietly, invisibly, teaching emergency response courses during the day, running her cafe in the evenings, asking nothing from anyone, owing nothing to anyone. She had buried her past beneath routine. She preferred it that way. "You're here early." Her only employee, Min Ji, a cheerful Korean university student, bounced through the door. "Couldn't sleep. Still thinking about that event?" Zuri's hands paused on the coffee machine. She hadn't told Min Ji details. Just that something had happened. "I'm fine. You've been checking the news constantly." Min Ji leaned against the counter. "Whatever happened, it rattled you." Zuri forced a smile. She had searched news reports, looking for information about the man she'd saved. But every article was vague. Prominent businessman treated for sudden medical episode. Full recovery expected. No photos. No names. Only whispered speculation in comment sections. References to someone called the Ghost Emperor. She had stopped searching after that. Some truths were better left undiscovered. 3 weeks after the restaurant, a letter arrived. Zuri read it twice. Then a third time. The building that housed her cafe had been sold. The new owner's company, Hanseong Holdings, would be conducting property assessments. Tenants would be contacted individually. She felt the first stirrings of dread. Her lease was month to month. She had no legal protection if the new owner decided to raise rent or clear the building. "Oh, Zuri." Minji's voice broke through her spiral. "The assessment people are here." She looked up. A team of professionals in dark suits entered her cafe. They photographed walls, measured dimensions, asked questions about equipment and revenue. Zuri answered mechanically. But when the team leader handed her a business card, she felt her blood freeze. Hanseong Holdings, a subsidiary of Kong Enterprises. Kong. The name echoed in her memory. She had heard it whispered at that rooftop restaurant. Before everything went silent. Before he collapsed. Before she saved him. "Miss Adebayo." She looked up. A new figure stood in her doorway. He was older, distinguished, gray temples and patient eyes. "I'm Park Jae-won." He bowed slightly. "I represent the property's new ownership. May I have a moment of your time?" Her instincts screamed. But she nodded, and let the wolf inside. Jae-won sat across from her in a corner booth. He ordered tea but didn't drink it. "Your cafe has impressive community reviews," he began. "Emergency response courses upstairs. Cultural cuisine below. You've built something meaningful here." "Thank you." She kept her answers short. Measured. The new ownership wishes to ensure valuable tenants are protected. He placed a document on the table. "This is an extended lease agreement. 5 years. Reduced rent. No conditions." Zuri stared at the paper. It was generous. Impossibly generous. "Why? Excuse me. Why would anyone offer this?" Her voice tightened. "You bought this building 3 weeks ago. You don't know me. You have no reason to protect my business." Jae-won's expression remained neutral. But something flickered in his eyes. "Respect, perhaps. The ownership appreciates what you've built." "Who owns this building?" Silence. "Who is your employer, Mr. Park?" He stood, straightened his jacket. "Someone who remembers kindness, Miss Adebayo. Even when the world forgets." He left the document and walked out. Zuri sat alone. Her hands trembled. She didn't sign the lease. But she didn't throw it away either. Across the street, 30 floors up, Kang Hyun-suk stood at a window. The tattoo on his neck, delicate Korean hangul woven through African Adinkra symbols, caught the light as he tilted his head. He watched her cafe. Watched her lock the door. Watched her walk home through evening crowds. She looked tired. But she moved with purpose. With the same quiet strength that had pushed through a terrified crowd and saved his life. "She refused the lease?" he asked. Jae-won stood behind him. "She questioned it. She's suspicious." "Good." His voice held no frustration. Only something that resembled admiration. "She's intelligent." "Sir, if you simply want to repay her." "I don't want to repay her." The words hung in the air. Jae-won waited. Hyun-suk rarely explained himself. "But tonight, she looked at me like I was human, Jae-won." His voice dropped. "Not a weapon. Not a threat. Not an opportunity." His jaw tightened. "She looked at me like I deserved to live." Jae-won understood then. This wasn't gratitude. This wasn't obsession with a debt unpaid. This was something far more dangerous. The Ghost Emperor, the man who trusted no one, had found someone who saw past his empire. And that person wanted nothing from him. Which made her the most valuable thing in his world. 1 month after the restaurant, Seoul's rainy season arrived without warning. Zuri had forgotten her umbrella. She stood beneath the cafe's awning, watching sheets of water flood the street. Her phone showed flood warnings. The subway would be chaos. She prepared to wait. Then, a black car slowed beside the curb. The door opened. A familiar face appeared. Park Jae-won. "Miss Adebayo. May I offer transportation?" Every instinct told her to refuse. But the rain intensified. And something in his patient expression felt less like threat. And more like duty. She got in. The car's interior was immaculate. Dark leather. Controlled temperature. Silent. She expected Jae-won to sit beside her. Instead, he closed the door from outside. And she realized she wasn't alone. Kang Hyun-suk sat across from her. Exactly as she remembered. Sharp jawline. Cold, piercing eyes. Absolute stillness. The tattoo on his wrist rested against tailored charcoal fabric. "Miss Adebayo." Her breath caught. But her voice held steady. "You." The car moved through flooded streets. Neither spoke for a long moment. Rain drummed against tinted windows. Zuri broke the silence. "You bought my building." "Yes." "You offered me an unreasonable lease." "Yes." "Why?" He studied her. The same way he had studied her that night. Like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "You saved my life. And now you're stalking me?" Something flickered across his features. Surprise. perhaps amusement. He wasn't accustomed to directness. I'm protecting you. From what? He didn't answer immediately. The car turned down a quieter street. From the consequences of your kindness. Zuri's eyes narrowed. What does that mean? The restaurant held 73 guests. His voice remained measured. 12 of them belonged to organizations that would benefit from my death. When I collapsed, they saw opportunity. When you saved me. He paused. They saw a problem. Her blood chilled. A problem. You denied them a victory. Some won't forget that. I'm nobody. You're the woman who resurrected the Ghost Emperor. His eyes held hers. You will never be nobody again. The weight of his words pressed against her chest. She hadn't asked for this. She had just done what was right. And now? What do you want from me? She whispered. He looked away. Toward the rain-streaked window. I don't know. The honesty in his voice stunned her. He sounded almost lost. I've spent 30 years knowing exactly what I want from everyone. His jaw tightened. Leverage. Loyalty. Fear. He turned back to her. But you. I just wanted to find you. I haven't figured out what comes after. The car stopped. She looked outside. Her apartment building. How do you know where I live? I know everything about you, Miss Adebayo. He didn't hide it. Your father's case. The accusations. The scandal. Your medical training in Lagos. Your volunteer work during the pandemic. Your arrival in Seoul. Everything. Her hands clenched. You investigated me. I investigate everyone who enters my world. I didn't enter your world. You saved my life. His voice dropped. You entered whether you wanted to or not. She reached for the door handle. Stay away from me. I can't. Then learn. She stepped into the rain. And didn't look back. Zuri expected harassment. Pressure. Demands. Instead, nothing. Days passed. No contact. No letters. No suspicious cars. She began to relax. Maybe he had listened. Maybe. Miss Adebayo. A customer approached her counter. He was young. Well-dressed. Handsome. I'm Daniel. He smiled warmly. I've passed this cafe 100 times but never stopped. Finally decided to try your famous chin-chin. She served him with polite distance. But he returned the next day. And the next. He was charming. Funny. Attentive. He asked her about Nigeria. About her courses. About her dreams. It had been so long since someone seemed genuinely interested. She found herself smiling more. Looking forward to his visits. But she didn't notice the shadow that darkened Hyun-suk's eyes when reports of Daniel's visits reached his desk. She didn't know Daniel's real employer. Or the information he had been sent to extract. She only knew that, for the first time in years, someone made her feel seen. Hyun-suk stood at his office window. Seoul's skyline stretched beneath him. Millions of lives. Thousands of enemies. Endless power. Yet his thoughts circled one woman. And the man who made her smile. Daniel Kwan. J1 read from a tablet. Real name unknown. Employed by the Yoon Syndicate. His assignment appears to be information gathering. Possibly recruitment. He's using her to reach me. Most likely. Hyun-suk's hand pressed flat against the glass. The tattoo on his wrist seemed darker in the dim light. Remove him. J1 hesitated. Sir, if we act aggressively, she'll know you're watching her. She'll resent the interference. She'll resent being manipulated more. Perhaps. But if you take this choice from her, I'm protecting her. Are you? Or are you punishing her for choosing someone else's attention? The silence that followed was dangerous. No one spoke to Hyun-suk this way. No one except J1, who had earned that privilege through decades of impossible loyalty. Hyun-suk's jaw clenched. What do you suggest? Let her discover the truth herself. When she does, and she will, she'll understand your restraint. Your patience. Jae-won met his gaze. "If you want her trust, sir, you cannot take it. You must earn it." The words hung in the air. Hyun-suk turned back to the window. Surveillance only. No intervention. Yet. Jae-won bowed, and left his employer alone with his jealousy, and the unfamiliar ache it caused. 2 weeks later, Zuri organized paperwork in her apartment. Tax documents, lease negotiations, course schedules. A knock interrupted her concentration. Daniel stood at her door. He looked nervous. "Zuri, I need to tell you something." She let him inside. "Is everything okay?" He paced, ran his hands through his hair. "I wasn't honest with you." Her stomach dropped. "About what?" "I was sent here. To get close to you." He couldn't meet her eyes. "There are people who want information about Kang Hyun-suk. They thought you might have access." The words stabbed through her. "Access? They know you saved him. They assumed he made contact. That he brought you into his circle." Daniel's voice broke. "I was supposed to find out what you knew. Report back. But what? I actually liked you." He finally looked at her. "I wasn't supposed to. It was supposed to be simple. Information for money. But you're real. You're kind. You're nothing like what they described." Zuri felt the floor tilt beneath her. "Who sent you?" He whispered a name. "Yoon." She didn't recognize it. But something in his fear told her enough. "Get out. Zuri. Get out of my home. Now." He left. She locked every bolt, sank against the door, and understood. Finally, that Kang Hyun-suk hadn't been paranoid. He had been right. She had become a target, and she had no idea how to protect herself. The call came at midnight. Hyun-suk answered immediately. "She's outside your building, sir." He moved before Jae-won finished speaking. The elevator descent felt eternal. When the doors opened, she stood in the lobby, soaked from rain she hadn't noticed, eyes red from tears she'd refused to shed. "You were right." Her voice was hollow. Hyun-suk stopped 3 feet away. He wanted to close the distance, to pull her inside, to destroy everyone who had made her look this broken. Instead, he removed his jacket, slowly, carefully, and draped it over her shoulders. She didn't resist. "Come upstairs. I don't want your protection." "I know. I don't want to owe you anything." "I know." "Then why are you helping me?" He studied her. Rain dripped from her hair. Mascara traced faint lines down her cheeks. She looked exhausted, betrayed, and still, somehow, beautiful. "Because you helped me." His voice dropped. "And no one ever has. Not without expecting something in return." She searched his face, looking for lies, finding none. "Just tonight," she whispered. "Just tonight." He led her to the elevator, and tried to ignore the way his chest tightened when she stepped closer. His penthouse was vast, minimalist, clean lines and neutral tones. But somehow, it didn't feel cold. Subtle warmth emanated from hidden sources. Art that suggested culture rather than displayed wealth. Windows that framed soul like a living painting. Guest room is down the hall. He kept his distance. Fresh clothes in the closet. Medical supplies in the bathroom if you need them. She hadn't moved. "You prepared for this?" "I prepare for everything." "You expected me to come here?" "I hoped." His honesty continued to surprise her. Every instinct she had about powerful men. Cold. Manipulative. Self-serving. He kept contradicting. "There's tea in the kitchen. Food if you're hungry." He stepped toward his own wing. "My room is on the opposite side of the apartment. You have privacy. You have safety." He paused at the threshold. "And if you decide to leave at dawn, I won't stop you." Just like that. He turned. The tattoo on his collarbone, visible beneath a loosened shirt, seemed to pulse in the dim light. "You saved my life, Miss Adebayo. I will never cage you. Even when caging you would be easier. He disappeared into darkness. She stood alone, wearing his jacket, surrounded by his world, and wondering, for the first time, if he was nothing like she assumed. She didn't sleep. Instead, she wandered. The penthouse held libraries, training rooms, a gallery of photographs. She stopped before one image. A young man, barely 20, stood beside an older woman. Their eyes held the same sharp darkness, but where his current expression showed nothing. This photograph captured something softer, almost vulnerable. "My mother." His voice came from behind her. She didn't startle. Somehow, his presence had become familiar. "She died 20 years ago." He joined her before the image. "Assassination meant for me." She stepped between. Zuri's chest tightened. "I'm sorry. Everyone who had a hand in her death is gone now." His tone held no triumph. "It took 15 years. But I found them all." She understood then. The coldness. The control. The walls that seemed impossibly high. He had loved once. Deeply. And it had destroyed him. "Is that when you became this? The Ghost Emperor?" He almost smiled. "I became what survival required. And now?" He looked at her. "Now I wonder if survival is enough." The words hung between them. Heavy. Honest. Before she could respond, his phone shattered the silence. His expression shifted instantly. Cold. Alert. "What?" J1's voice carried urgency. "Sir, the Yoon Syndicate made a move. They tried to access Miss Adebayo's apartment while she was here, likely planting surveillance or evidence." Hyun-suk's jaw clenched. "Casualties?" "None. Your security team intercepted them cleanly." "Hold them." "Already done." He ended the call. Looked at Zuri. "Your apartment has been compromised." Her face paled. "What does that mean?" "It means you can't go back. Not safely." "For how long?" He didn't answer. But his silence told her everything. 3 days passed. Zuri remained in his penthouse. She hated it. The dependency. The uncertainty. The constant proximity to a man she couldn't categorize. But she also couldn't deny. She felt safe. For the first time in years. They developed routines. Breakfast at separate times. Minimal conversation. Maximum distance. Yeah. She noticed things. The way he adjusted meeting schedules to avoid disturbing her courses. The way fresh flowers from her cafe supplier appeared in the kitchen. The way Nigerian music played softly through hidden speakers. Artists she'd mentioned loving years ago in an interview she'd forgotten giving. He remembered everything. Honored everything. Without asking acknowledgement. "You don't have to do this." She found him one evening, standing at the window. The tattoo on his hand, catching fading sunlight, seemed to pulse with his heartbeat. "Do what?" "Make me comfortable. I'm not staying forever." "I know. So why?" "Because for 3 days, you've lived under my roof." He didn't turn around. "And for 3 days, you've woken up safe. Gone to sleep safe. Continued your work. Maintained your life." His voice dropped. "I want you to remember that. Even after you leave. Why does that matter to you?" Now he turned. His eyes held something she'd never seen before. Vulnerability. "Because I want you to remember me differently than everyone else does." The admission hung in the air. Raw. Unguarded. She didn't know how to respond. So she simply nodded. And returned to her room. But that night, for the first time, she dreamed of him. And the dream wasn't frightening. 1 week after moving in, Zuri received a document. J1 delivered it personally. "Sir asked me to give you this." She opened it, and her world stopped. It was evidence. Bank records. Communication logs. Witness testimonies. All relating to her father's case. The false accusations that destroyed her family. The evidence that could have cleared his name. If it had existed. But it did exist. Someone had hidden it. For 14 years. And now, where did this come from? Her voice shook. Jae-won hesitated. Sir has been investigating your father's case since he learned your identity. The evidence was buried within files belonging to the Yoon Syndicate. The people who sent Daniel. Yes. And the people who originally framed your father. Zuri's hands trembled. He did this. Hyun-suk found this. He believed you deserved the truth, regardless of whether you chose to stay. Tears blurred her vision. Why didn't he tell me himself? Because he didn't want gratitude to influence your decision. Jae-won's voice softened. He wanted you to choose freely. Stay or leave. Without debt. Without obligation. She clutched the documents. 14 years. Her mother had died believing her husband was a criminal. Her siblings had scattered, ashamed of a name that meant disgrace. Zuri had carried the weight alone. And now, a man she had known for weeks, a man the world called monster, had given her what no one else could. The truth. She found him on the rooftop. Night air surrounded them. Soul spread beneath like scattered diamonds. You found who destroyed my father. He turned. His expression revealed nothing. But his eyes. They searched hers for something. Hope. Perhaps. Yes. The Yoon Syndicate. Their former leader. He's dead now. Natural causes. 12 years ago. His jaw tightened. I can't give you justice for him. But I can ensure his successors face consequences. You did this for me. I did this because it was right. Most people wouldn't care about right. I'm not most people. She stepped closer. The space between them felt electric. Who are you really? Underneath the ghost emperor. He didn't retreat. A man who stopped believing anyone would see him as human. His voice dropped. Until someone did. Her breath caught. I didn't know who you were when I saved you. I know. If I had known, you still would have saved me. He held her gaze. Because that's who you are. You don't calculate value. You see life. And you preserve it. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I don't know how to trust you. Then don't. Not yet. He lifted his hand, slowly, giving her time to pull away, and wiped a tear from her cheek. But let me keep earning it. His touch was gentle, reverent, like she was something precious. And for the first time, she didn't want to run. The Yoon Syndicate struck 3 days later. Not at Hyun-suk. At Zuri. She had returned to her cafe, under heavy guard, to retrieve essential documents. The explosion came without warning. Glass shattered. Fire bloomed. Zuri felt herself thrown backward. Impact. Darkness. Then, strong arms. A familiar voice cutting through the chaos. Zuri. Zuri, stay with me. She opened her eyes. Hyun-suk's face hovered above her. Blood streaked his cheek, from her wounds, not his. His expression held something she'd never seen. Fear. Raw. Uncontrolled. Fear. I'm okay, she whispered. You're not okay. His voice broke. This is my fault. I should have. You saved me. Her hand found his. Squeezed. His whole body stilled. I will burn them to the ground. His whisper held the promise of apocalypse. Every single one. Don't. Her grip tightened. Don't become what they expect. They hurt you. And if you destroy yourself getting revenge, they still win. Sirens approached. His men swarmed. Medical personnel surrounded her. But Hyun-suk never let go of her hand. Not until they forced him to. And in that moment, both understood. Something between them had fundamentally shifted. Recovery took weeks. Zuri refused hospitalization after the first 3 days. Instead, she returned to his penthouse. By choice. He converted an entire wing into rehabilitation space. The best therapists. The best equipment. The best care money could purchase. But what surprised her most was his presence. He cancelled meetings. delegated empire decisions, sat with her during painful exercises, read to her when sleep wouldn't come, never touched her beyond what healing required, never pushed, never demanded, just stayed. "You don't have to do this," she said one night. "Your empire must be suffering. Empires recover." He didn't look up from the book in his hands. "You're more important." The words washed over her. Quiet, simple, devastating. Why? Now he looked up. The tattoo on his neck, visible above his collar, seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. "Because you're the first person in 20 years who made me feel something other than revenge." She had no response, so she simply reached out, took his hand, and held it until they both fell asleep. Full recovery took 2 months. During that time, Zuri learned who Kang Hyun-suk truly was. Not the ghost emperor, not the legend, the man. She learned he visited orphanages anonymously, funded hospitals across 3 continents, ensured the children of fallen employees received education. Quietly, without acknowledgement, without expectation. She learned his empire operated through fear, but his personal code operated through something else entirely. Honor, loyalty, justice that systems couldn't provide. She learned he had never taken an innocent life, never betrayed someone who trusted him, never forgotten a debt, owed or unpaid. And she learned, slowly, painfully, that she was falling in love with him. Spring arrived. Seoul softened into cherry blossoms and gentle rain. Zuri stood on his rooftop garden, watching the city wake. He joined her silently. They had become comfortable with shared silence. But today felt different. "The evidence you gathered." She spoke without turning. "My father's name will be cleared next week. Official announcement. Public restoration. You deserve that. My mother died believing she married a criminal." Her voice wavered. She never knew the truth, but she knew she married a good man. His voice came closer, even when the world said otherwise. She knew. Zuri finally turned. He stood 3 feet away, close enough to touch, too far to reach. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say exactly what I need to hear." His expression softened, fractionally, but she caught it. "Because I spend every moment trying to understand you." "Why?" "You know why." The words hung between them. Cherry blossoms drifted past. "Say it." Her voice dropped. "Please." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I love you." No hesitation. No qualification. "I've loved you since you knelt beside me in that restaurant and looked at me like I deserved to live. I will love you until my last breath. And if there's something after," his voice broke, "I'll find you there too." Tears streamed down her face. "I'm not who you need. You're exactly who I need. I'm ordinary. You're extraordinary." He cupped her face gently. "You're the only person in this world who made me want to be better than what I am." She leaned into his touch. "I don't know how to do this." "Neither do I." His forehead rested against hers. "But I'd rather learn with you than succeed with anyone else." And finally, she kissed him. Softly, deliberately. A kiss that held every unspoken word. Every moment of tension. Every sacrifice. Every choice. When they separated, he looked at her like she had saved him all over again. And perhaps she had. Peace lasted 6 weeks. Then the mastermind revealed himself. Not the Yoon Syndicate. They were pawns. The true enemy had been hiding in plain sight. Kang Won-shik, Hyun-suk's own uncle. The man who had orchestrated the assassination that killed his mother. The man who had framed Zuri's father to protect his operations. The man who had spent 20 years pretending loyalty while manipulating everything from the shadows. He's been bleeding your empire for decades. J1 presented evidence. Redirecting resources. Eliminating threats to his position. Creating enemies where none existed. Hyun-suk's face remained stone. But his hand, The one bearing the tattoo trembled with barely contained rage. He killed my mother. He ordered it to ensure you would become what he could control. A weapon focused outward, never inward. Zuri watched Hyun-suk process this, watched decades of pain crystallize into clarity. "What will you do?" she asked quietly. He looked at her. His eyes held fire, but also something else. Something new. The right thing. The takedown was surgical. Not violence. Evidence. Hyun-suk dismantled his uncle's protection piece by piece. Bank records made public. Communication logs released. Witness testimonies presented to authorities who couldn't be bought. He sacrificed portions of his own empire to expose the truth. Criminal enterprises he could have protected. He surrendered. Illegal operations he could have hidden. He revealed. Because the only way to destroy one Shik completely was to burn down the shadows they both inhabited. "You're destroying everything you built." Jae-won's voice held concern. "Decades of work. I'm destroying what he corrupted." Hyun-suk's voice was calm. "What remains will be clean. You'll lose power. I'll gain freedom." He looked toward the window. Toward the city that had feared him. "I'm tired of being the ghost emperor, Jae-won." His voice softened. "I want to be the man she believes I can be." Jae-won nodded slowly. Understanding. Accepting. "Then let's finish this." One Shik's arrest made international news. 4 weeks, headlines screamed revelations. Corruption spanning continents. Murders spanning decades. Conspiracy spanning generations. Zuri's father's case became the emotional center. A Nigerian immigrant falsely accused. A family destroyed by greed. A daughter who never stopped believing. Public sympathy transformed into public outcry. Justice, long delayed, finally arrived. And through it all, Hyun-suk remained invisible. No credit. No acknowledgement. Just quiet presence at Zuri's side. When journalists asked how the evidence surfaced, she said nothing. When officials inquired about her sources, she protected him, as he had protected her. 6 months after one Shik's conviction, Hyun-suk stood before a new building. The Adebayo Foundation for Emergency Response. Glass and steel. State-of-the-art training facilities. Medical equipment. Education programs. Named for the man whose destruction had ultimately created something beautiful. Zuri stood beside him, her hand in his. "You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. It must have cost less than my soul was worth." He looked at her. "You gave that back to me. This is nothing in comparison." She leaned against his shoulder. The tattoo on his wrist, now visible as he'd stopped hiding it, caught the light. African geometry intertwined with Korean calligraphy. 2 cultures. 2 histories. United in permanent ink. "What does it mean?" she asked. "The tattoo. You've never explained." He lifted his wrist. Studied the design. Survival through connection. His voice dropped. "My mother had African heritage. Distant. But she honored it. This was her design. She drew it before she died." His jaw tightened. "I had it inked the day I buried her. To remember that strength doesn't mean isolation." Zuri's eyes filled. "She would have loved this foundation. She would have loved you." The certainty in his voice broke something inside her, and rebuilt it stronger. 1 year after the rooftop restaurant, Zuri prepared for the foundation's anniversary gala. She wore Nigerian traditional fabric, handwoven by her mother before she passed. Colors of sunset. Patterns of heritage. She had never felt more beautiful. A knock interrupted her reflection. She opened the door. Hyun-suk stood in a tailored black suit, the tattoo on his neck visible above the collar. His expression held something she'd never seen before. Nervousness. "You look." He stopped. Started again. "There aren't words." She smiled. "Neither are you." They arrived at the foundation together. Hundreds of guests. Dignitaries. Survivors. families who had benefited from the programs. Zuri spoke about her father, about justice delayed, about hope restored. The crowd applauded. Then, the lights shifted, music softened, and Kang Hyun-suk stepped onto the stage. He had never addressed public gatherings. The Ghost Emperor operated in shadows. But tonight he stood in full light. "I have something to say." His voice carried across the silent room. Every eye focused on him. "1 year ago, I collapsed in a restaurant surrounded by powerful people. None of them moved. They calculated risk, weighed consequence, and decided my life wasn't worth their involvement." He paused. One woman didn't calculate. She didn't weigh. She simply acted. Because that's who she is. She sees life as valuable. Every life. Even the lives of men the world calls monsters. Zuri's breath caught. "She saved me in ways she doesn't understand. Not just physically. She reminded me what it means to be human. What it means to choose love over power. What it means to build rather than destroy." He turned toward her. "I spent decades becoming untouchable, unreachable, unlovable." His voice cracked. "But she touched me anyway. She reached me anyway. She loved me anyway." He stepped off the stage, walked through the parting crowd, stopped before her, and knelt. A velvet box appeared in his hand. Inside, a ring. Simple, elegant. A center stone the color of Nigerian sunsets. Set in Korean white gold. Two cultures. United. Zuri Adebayo. His voice held everything. "You kissed me back to life. Let me spend the rest of mine proving I was worth saving." Tears streamed down her face. The room held its breath. She knelt before him, took his face in her hands, and whispered, "Yes." The crowd erupted. But neither heard them. They only heard each other's heartbeats. Finally synchronized. Finally home. 3 years later, the Adebayo Foundation had expanded to 12 countries. Zuri led emergency response programs across Africa and Asia. Hyun-suk consulted, legitimately, on international logistics. The Ghost Emperor had become something different. Something better. They stood on their rooftop. The same rooftop where everything began. Where a man collapsed. Where a woman saved him. Where fate refused to be denied. "What are you thinking?" Zuri asked. He pulled her close. The wedding ring on his finger caught the light. The tattoo on his wrist seemed to glow. "I'm thinking about that night." His voice was soft. "When you knelt beside me. When you breathed life into my lungs. You remember that?" "I remember everything." He kissed her forehead. "I remember thinking, even unconscious, that I wasn't ready to die. That something was coming. Something worth surviving for." She looked up at him. "And I was right." The sun set over Seoul. Two people. Two cultures. Two histories. Standing together. Not as emperor and savior. Not as protected and protector. But as equals. As partners. As love made manifest. In the end, the darkness that had defined him didn't destroy them. The tragedy that had haunted her didn't define them. They chose each other. Again and again. In every moment. Forever. Sometimes, the most dangerous man in the world doesn't need enemies to destroy him. He needs one person brave enough to save him. And patient enough to love who he becomes. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more stories of love transcending every boundary. Until next time.